Hey guys, welcome to Dominate Fishing. I'm Dan Meyer, and in today's short video we're going to talk about how to jig for crappies, especially in the summertime, because this is something that a lot of guys do wrong. So there's two things that we have to look at when we want to jig for crappies. The first is location. The second is the actual technique. So before we get to the actual technique, we're going to talk about the location, because for crappies that's real important, because you've got to be right on them in order for jigging to work. So there's three main places that I will jig for crappies. The first place is in the weeds. Now if you've been following me at all, I fish for crappies in the weeds most of the time during the summer. So when you're in the weeds, the times you're going to be jigging, and incidentally, when I'm fishing weeds for crappies, most of the time I'm casting and retrieving to the boat. Sometimes I will vertical jig them. So the times that you're going to vertical jig crappies is in the weeds is, first, if you're fishing a weed bed on a real steep bank, what's going to happen is those weeds, they're going to come out and then they're all of a sudden going to stop, and there's going to be a steep weed edge. When you've got that really steep weed edge, so the weeds are coming up vertical real high to the top, and then all of a sudden they just stop and there's a real defined edge, taking your boat with your trolling motor just a little bit off that weed edge, and then just holding your rod, a nice long rod, this is a 7-footer, but an 8 or a 9-footer would even work better, and just jigging right on that weed edge can be very effective. Another time it can be effective is when you're actually up in the weeds and you're just dipping your bait down into the little pockets. If you've got a real thick cabbage weed bed, there'll be little pockets where the weeds didn't grow as good, so they're either shorter or there's no weeds. Dipping your bait down into those pockets and jigging there can be very effective. Another spot that works real well for jigging is over brush piles. Brush piles are they're a really good spot because they're holding the fish into a concentrated area. You get over the top of the brush pile. Jigging's probably the most effective approach. It's very hard to cast over them because you're probably going to snag it, but getting just right over the top and jigging, that's another effective spot. The other effective spot, and probably where I do the most jigging for crappies in the summer, is if I'm fishing some very deep timber, like a flowage, where there used to be trees all over. They flooded it. Now all those trees are underwater, and you've got these big trees coming way up in the water. So like where I've been fishing, where I was fishing a couple weeks ago, it was 33 feet deep, and there was trees down there, and some of the trees came all the way up to the top. Now when you're fishing a spot like this, you got to know where the crappies are. Like when we were fishing that, it was 33 feet deep, but the crappies were suspended out there like 10 to 15 feet down. So that's an effective spot to jig, but you need to make sure you're jigging 10 to 15 feet down. If you let that bait go all the way to the bottom, you're not going to get anything because the fish are all suspended 10 to 15 feet. And this is kind of where I'm really talking about location being key. In order for your jig presentation to work, you have to be right where those fish are at, the sweet spot around 12 feet deep, even though the water's 30 feet. So you're going to need to use your electronics to find where those fish are holding. Now, once you know where the fish are holding, it's time for the actual jigging technique. And actually, this technique is pretty much what you're going to use, whether it's spring, summer, whatever. You're just going to be fishing different depths. So what you're going to do is, the first thing to know is crappies, they don't like this real erratic movement. So a lot of guys, when they're jigging, they're going to do it like they do when they're walleye jigging, and they're going to do these big twitches upwards. They're going to be pulling that bait a couple feet, and they might be pulling in different directions. All that erratic motion, that's going to pull that bait out of the strike zone, and the fish are going to lose interest. Crappies, what they like to do is they like to come right up under that bait and just look at it and then hit. So if you're making this big erratic motion, you're going to turn 90% of those fish off, 99% of those fish off. So what you want to do is, I'll take my rod and I'll just do a lot of this little twitching, which is just going to make the bait, I'll show you. it's just going to kind of make that bait dance a little bit. Just make that bait dance instead of move all the way up and down. And then what you can do is you can take your rod tip, you're holding it steady, and then just drop it a couple inches. And then just hold it steady. Then drop it a couple inches. If that's not getting the strike, then instead just raise it up a couple inches and then drop it back down. Raise it up and drop it back down. Real slow and steady movements to get these crappies to bite. Now some days the crappies are going to hit it on the drop. So that's why you're going to take your rod tip and you're just going to drop it a couple inches to see if you're going to get the strike. Some days they'll want to hit it on the rise. So then instead of dropping it, you're just going to raise it up a little bit, nice and slow. They'll hit it on the rise. A lot of times what you're going to find is they're going to hit it when your rod is just sitting motionless. How many times you've been fishing with two rods, you're jigging one rod, you set it down, and then you're working another rod, jigging that, and the rod that's just sitting there gets hit. That happens all the time. Because crappies like a little bit of movement to no movement a lot of times. Now, to my example before, when I was fishing in 33 feet of water, those fish were suspended 10 to 15 feet down. When you're fishing like that, the little movement, it's not covering the full range of water. So what I'll do then is I'll start, say, maybe down 15 feet. And the way I normally get there is this is a 7-foot rod, so I'll measure out 2 rod lengths and I know I'm about 14, or I'll pull out a foot at a time and count it down to 15. So I'll start down at 15, then I'll slowly raise it up about 5 feet, so I'm at 10. And as I'm slowly raising it, I'll be pausing it every foot, foot and a half, just letting it sit there, maybe shaking it a little bit, move it back up. When I get up to the 10, just hold it there. Then slowly drop it back down. So if the fish, there's some sitting at 15, there's some sitting at 12, there's some sitting at 10, and all the depths in between, that's when the bigger jigging motion, but very slow is the key with pauses, is going to work. So that's pretty much how you're going to jig for crappies. You don't want to be doing this really erratic thing. That's going to turn them off and it's not going to bring them over. That would work for walleyes because you can get the reaction strike, but not for crappies. So I hope this video helped you. If it did, hit the thumbs up or the like button. Also, if this is your first time here, I'd love to have you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I do videos just like this to help you catch more and bigger fish. So like, subscribe, and I will see you next time.